Today's episode is all about the importance of online communities and online self-service for engineers and technical buyers. We'll talk about how your brand can approach participating in online communities and the importance of adding self-service features to your website. And for those of you that work at smaller companies, you may think it's out of touch for your budget or out of range, but it's certainly not. So we'll dispel some of those myths. We also touch on the value of podcasts and why research is so important for understanding your buyers. Let's do this.
Welcome to Content Marketing Engineered, your source for building trust and generating demand with technical content. Here is your host, Wendy Covey.
Hi, and welcome to Content Marketing Engineered. On each episode, I'll break down an industry trend, challenge, or best practice in reaching technical audiences. You'll meet colleagues, friends, and clients of mine who will stop by to share their stories. And I hope that you leave each episode feeling inspired and ready to take action. Before we jump in, I'd like to give a brief shout out to my agency, True Marketing. True is a full service agency located in beautiful Austin, Texas, serving highly technical companies. For more information, visit truemarketing.com. And now on with our podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Content Marketing Engineered. I'm joined today by two great folks from EETech. We have David Blaza, who's the Global Sales Director, and Terra Gledhill, who's the Director of Research and Marketing. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Great to be with
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Yeah.
I have a battery of questions for you guys. I'm so excited to just dive into the different aspects of EETech and then get your perspective on what it's like marketing to engineers and technical buyers, especially in the electronic space. I know you conduct a lot of research in that area and have just all kinds of knowledge to impart to help we marketers out here every day trying to connect with them. So let's just dive in. And I thought it would be helpful if we started with a little bit of context and history. And David, I'll pick on you first because you've been in the publishing industry and now, of course, digital community industry for 3 decades. And you've seen all kinds of change. So I'd like to start with just hearing what are some of the key moments that have stood out to you and how things have evolved over time in this area.
Yeah. Thanks, Wendy. Yes, in fact, it's scary for me to think I actually joined what was CMP Media in 1994. So it's actually 30 years more this year. And back then, that was pre kind of the dot-com boom, and print was still big in B2B media. Print was an enormous part of the revenue streams. And I worked on some iconic brands in electronics like EE Times, which was kind of like I worked on it for many years. And it was back then we would have issues. We had anniversary issues. I've got a copy, so I should pull it out. It's like a 300-page issue. People forget that.
Wow.
Yes, I know. I think it was the 25th anniversary issue of the publication, and it was publishing back there, like in the traditional sense. It was a print magazine. It was a weekly. And it really was, there was lots of other print brands as well, but this is prior to the web changing all of our lives. It was kind of a dramatic time. So I started when it was print, but we did launch a website pretty early on. I think it was Comdex of 94.
Comdex.
Comdex, yes.
Bringing back so many
crazy history, yes, yeah. And we launched a website at the show, and I sold some of the first banner ads. We really didn't know what we were doing, but it was fun times. Yeah. So a lot has happened. Obviously, a lot of amazing companies came out of it. And probably one of the biggest things was search. Probably, if you think about it, what happened with Google? I mean, we all live in Google's world, and even to this day, when Google changes the algorithm, it's panic. It's a panic attack for everybody. In whether you're in media publishing or you're running your own a business website, where does your traffic come from, and why did it all disappear overnight, right? So SEO is one of the biggest challenges, I think, for digital marketers. But then that is, of course, connected to content, right? Content. We talk about content marketing. You've still got to, even in earlier days, great content is still really important, and that has not changed. Whether it's on your website or through the media companies, content is still key to everything. Yeah, so I think it's been a wild ride, but it's been good for me intellectually because things change all the time, right? You've got to keep up to date with it. Sorry, so I was rambling on a bit there, but I'll let. I hope I answered your question.
I love it, and it was an interesting journey. So I started at National Instruments at, let's see, 1997. So I was there in those early days too, and just to watch the evolution of print to print plus website to website forward, and print taking a backseat to now, now we're looking at instead of a website that's tied to a print publication, now it's really about online communities and their extensions out. So it's really turned inside out, I think, at this point.
Absolutely, and I think that transition was very hard for some brands to be, to put all the news, all the information online first before it went into print. There was a lot of stress about that, and I do remember when we closed EE Times and many other of those brands. But electronics, you may remember, was on the leading edge of this. In fact, there are still markets in B2B marketing that still have some strong print brands. When I was in the energy market, I was working on somewhere. The print still exists, which is, I mean, in electronics, you will probably well remember, it went very quickly. But as all of the big advertisers really became, and you were with one of them, National Instruments was Texas Instruments was a pioneer in digital marketing.
Yeah. No, I was with the NI one, not the TI one.
Yes, I know. The other instruments, yes. Yeah.
Yes, but we were, very early on. What we did is each media group adopted their electronic counterpart. And so, advertising adopted digital advertising. I was the events manager, so we adopted webinars and virtual conferences and things like that. So it was an interesting dichotomy to manage physical trade shows and webinars and seminars all at the same time, and to compare performance and where people were in the buyer's journey and that sort of thing. So
that's going on to this day because we're doing virtual events still. And maybe we might talk about trade shows at some point, but there's these kind of different worlds, and how well they're connected together from a marketing point of view is hard. I think still hard, to trace the buyers. Did they come to see you at a trade show? Did they see you online? Did they see it, and then how do you, stay engaged with them is still one of the biggest issues in digital marketing, I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways that EETech helps with that, of course, is through your communities. So Terra, you've been awfully quiet over there, so time to pick on you a little bit.
Sorry.
Maybe give us an overview of the different communities that you guys have, some history, maybe how this came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually started as digital first. Back in 2015, our co-founders, Adam LaBarbera, met up with Rob Pengelly, and Rob Pengelly is actually the original founder of All About Circuits 20 years ago, when he was actually in school, and it came from a digital textbook and then adding on a forum piece to it so people could actually talk with each other and kind of figure out these problems. And from there, it just kind of took off. So we now own or operate 7 brands, or what we call communities. And we've got All About Circuits for electrical engineers, which is actually the largest online community of electrical engineers. And then we've got control.com for control and automation engineers. We've got Maker Pro for makers and hobbyists, EE Power for power engineers. And then even global, we've got microcontroller.net, which is primarily German and European engineers. Let's see, Bodo's Power Systems for German and European power engineers. And then 21IC, which is the largest Chinese electrical engineering community. So like altogether, I think it's like 2.5 million engineers, and it's all and has always been just digital first. So that's, I was going to say, that's the overview right there. We've got quite a few.
And it started with a digital book on
Digital
a
textbook.
digital textbook and a forum, and then just like there you go. There was the business model, the origin story. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
what's great is Rob still is the webmaster for All About Circuits 20 years later. He works on the site every day. So yeah, where we started is still where we're at.
And when engineers interact on the communities, do they all have some similarities on different features that they offer, or is each one kind of unique in how it's built?
I was gonna say they're all, I mean, I think very similar. They all have that forum piece so everyone can kind of, peer-to-peer connect. They all have news coverage and technical articles and calculators and textbooks and video webinars, and just it's this massive resource. And our whole thing is helping engineers engineer the future. So anything that we can do, or any companies that we can work with that also believe in helping them, just kind of innovate and empower them, is kind of the whole point. So yeah, they're all, I think, very similar in that aspect.
Yeah. And is it mainly community driven content, or do you have editors that publish, or how does that look?
Yes, we have editorial teams for I was going to say for at least All About Circuits, Control, and EE Power, like full-time editorial teams that are doing conference coverage and news coverage and interviews with big companies and little companies about new technology. So yeah.
I'm curious. I asked a question of you guys before we came on, and I'm gonna bring it back up again. So I said, well, are you a publisher or an online community? And you're like, no, we're a community. And so I want to understand the key differences in your mind between, because I hear we have editors who have an editorial calendar, and I think that's important, right? That you're setting the tone for what's important in the industry and staying on top of it. But then there's this community aspect, which is clearly very important to these. So tell me about that community part, and then how it all fits together.
Well, if maybe I could jump in here. I think one thing that we've all learned about the web is that user-generated content is key to all of it, right? So the engineers who are actually doing the work and have that sort of inherent knowledge of those designs and those markets and applications, they're the best people to talk about it. An editor, in a lot of ways, can only sort of can't be the gatekeeper for everything. They don't know everything. A lot of our editors were engineers in their working lives, but they did.
Yeah.
It's the users who are doing the work who want to share that. That knowledge is kind of key to communities, and that. I mean, that's one of the kind of, I would call it the secrets of the web, but anybody can publish something or post content, and then that builds on itself because somebody knows something else, and so it has that kind of network effect, which is why we have so much traffic and so much engagement, as opposed to the traditional world of media and publishing. When I was a publisher, people used to look upon that, oh, publisher, that's kind of a quaint term, it's from an earlier time where we were the gatekeepers for all the information.
Very good point.
What was published, whether it was in print or online. This is a different way of looking at the world, and it's the users who have got the deep knowledge. Then that's why it's so useful, because here's somebody who's actually done it. Right, as opposed to somebody who hasn't done it, who has just written about it. So I think that's the big difference: is the users generate a lot of the content.
Great. That it makes total sense to me. And in fact, it makes me think, and this is a little bit different too, but you mentioned earlier about search optimization and all these changes with Google, and with the helpful content update, Google's really looking to validate, is this an actual person answering this question or publishing this data, and do they know something about the topic? And as a result, Reddit, of all things, has been surfaced more readily by Google because it's users generating answers and content. And I would think that very similarly, you have actual people interacting online, sharing their knowledge, and that I think would be a good Google play as well for those looking for optimization to interact on your communities.
Yes, Terra and I were just talking about Reddit because they're going public. Is it this week or next week?
I believe it's right around the corner. Yeah,
Yes,
maybe
so
by the
Terra,
time this publishes, it probably had just happened.
yes, and actually Terra has a good saying about we are. What did you say, Terra? We were Reddit
We're
for.
the we're Reddit for engineers.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I see
So
that.
you nailed it. Absolutely. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
Well, it's top of mind. We just had a search expert on the show talking about how important online communities are to being surfaced, on search and with Google. So it's a win-win, and it's so authentic to
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I know another aspect of your communities are podcasts. So I'd like to know, why did you decide to publish podcasts? It's a lot of work, as I know. And how long have you been at it, and how's it going?
Yeah. So the podcast actually came about in 2020 because of COVID. So in this kind of era of isolation and disconnectedness, we just kind of tried to figure out what can we do, like, to make people feel connected and to give them more content than just technical articles. So actually real stories about real engineers and real tech. So yeah, it started in 2020, and then Daniel Bogdanoff came on in 2021. And I think he came in around like episode 28, and we're about to publish our 75th episode.
Oh, wow.
So
Congrats.
thank you. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
as you know, but it's extremely rewarding. And it's kind of, I say that it's like the most exciting part of my job, because it almost feels like you get to work with rock stars or like celebrities. So yeah, we get to, work with like NASA astronauts and Google and this kind of stuff. But then when you get into the industry piece of it, it's, the co-founder of Arduino, Massimo Bonzi, is just sweetest man. So getting to work with him, and you kind of get a little starstruck. And I remember when the CTO of NVIDIA sent me a LinkedIn request, and I was like, oh my gosh, we made it. We're so big.
Nice.
It's been just so interesting. And then you get to learn about all the really cool new tech stuff. So companies that are adopting AI or building software for hardware engineers, and the ways that you get to see how that's kind of the future of the industry is going. It's been really interesting. And then also, like, you learn cool stuff. We had, I think it was like Bill Vass from AWS was talking about the reason why we have touch screens, and it's because of Star Trek. And the guy who worked on the set got tired of going, yeah. So he got tired of going to Radio Shack to keep buying all these little like knobs and dials to make the sets. And he just got so annoyed with it that he's like, we're just gonna make it look like we're touching the screen. And then that is how like everything kind of domino affected after that, of like, well, oh, Star Trek knows the future and everything's gonna be touchscreen now. So you get to hear these like fascinating stories, and Daniel Bogdanoff is just amazing, especially because he's also an electrical engineer, so he can dive really deep into the technical stuff. He's got great energy, so it's extremely rewarding and very, very interesting.
Yes, yes. And we've had Daniel on, Content Marketing Engineered, a while back, so I'll link to his episode in the show notes. But I love his title, Resident Geek at Keysight. So
Yes.
and he has a great energy, and just the way he publishes content in his voice. So we use him as an example of how personal brand and corporate brand live alongside each other, because I think he executes that very well. So I love that he's your host.
He does. I remember at the Industrial Marketing Summit during that presentation, I got to see him up on the screen with the All About Circuits webpage. I was very, very proud and excited.
There we are. Yay. Well, I'm curious, you said you started during COVID, and of course I have my own data on podcast adoption, but before I share that, and how has it gone for you as you look at the growth in episode downloads or whatever metrics you use? Are you up and to the right? Are things continuing to grow with that podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a huge part of it is when we started focusing more on YouTube. So it's on every podcast platform. There's Spotify and Google and all of this kind of stuff. And we were trying to figure out, do they like bigger guests from bigger companies? Is it new tech? And so we've tried following these stats for so long. But another thing is, not a lot of people out there publish their podcast stats. There's no like really looking at like how many downloads does Joe Rogan get or any of this. It's really hard to find kind of these benchmarks.
Yes.
So we're kind of just looking at, our data. And then I think when we started just investing more and putting more focus on YouTube is when we saw the numbers really, really take off. So I have no problem sharing our numbers. We are up to around like 9,000 listens per episode on average. And we've got ones that'll go viral, like our like Intel episode, I think, hit like 20,000 views and stuff on YouTube. But that YouTube is just a huge part of it. So I would say now that we've kind of figured out what works for us and where people are actually hanging out and listening to podcasts, it's definitely gotten a lot better.
Those are fantastic numbers. I think you should be very proud to share those. So congratulations on that. And you may remember at IMS, if you're at my session, we recently published the State of Marketing to Engineers report, and in it found that this year over 90% of technical buyers listen to podcasts weekly for work, and that was a huge jump year over year. So congrats for being in there early and just being in the game. So I think a lot of people are taking notice right now. And a great way to get started, of course, is to be on somebody else's show, like All About Circuits. So if someone's listening and they're interested in that, we'll get to that at the end about how they might contact you about that. But I have other questions for you, so let's move on. Speaking of research, you publish an annual Engineering Insights report. So first, again, been there, research is really time consuming. So why focus on research? What was the catalyst for this?
Yeah, that started, I'd say, I think 7 years ago. And it started kind of simply. It was, I think every company asks themselves, like, how can we be better? And how can we like better serve our target audience or our clients? So we just decided to ask them. So just this really small survey just to our communities. And it was questions like, what kind of content do you want to see more of? And what kind of content are you relying on for your design process? And, what manufacturers do you actually like using? What do you struggle with? And so it was these really simple questions. And we were just amazed that they were so willing to share their opinion. And then every year it's just kind of grown. And I mean, it's turned into something amazing. I think our last study, we had like over 10,000 respondents. So yeah, it's, and also interesting in like trying to predict trends. So this is the first year that we asked people about their AI adoption. And there's always, you learn the things that, don't surprise you, like younger engineers prefer video tutorials over their career pro counterparts. But I think, it was really interesting to see like the AI adoption that you've got, like something like half of younger engineers are already adopting it, where only a quarter of career pros are. And then there's also, some little stuff that you find out, like when you ask them how they prefer to interact with suppliers, rest of the world is they just want to email, they want that low touch point. But then if you like segment out China, the top two are, I think, like reaching out to an FAE and a phone call. So getting to see those regional differences is really interesting as well.
Yeah, that's shocking.
Yeah,
I didn't think anyone wanted phone calls anymore.
I know. I honestly couldn't believe it. But yeah, apparently they prefer like a higher touch point, I guess.
Yeah. What did you, on your AI questions, did you ask how they were using AI? Just curious.
We asked what phase they're using it in. And
Okay.
for the younger generations, it's basically like, I think the number one response was all phases. So
Oh,
they
wow.
have, I mean, definitely figured out how to implement it into their work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
one of the really hot areas in AI is code development
Mhm.
and documentation. Obviously, in engineering, you got to keep track of who's writing the document, whether they're going to be writing manuals or keeping track of all the versions of software and hardware. So there's obviously a lot of very natural uses of AI in our industry in electronics because they need to keep track of everything, right? And it's so that I think, writing code as well, especially in test scripts. And well, you came from that, there's a lot of things you've got to keep records on in engineering, and I think AI is perfect for that. So I think the adoption was a big surprise to me, actually, the speed with which it's happened in our industry, particularly amongst the kind of next generation engineers. I think it's gonna go fast.
Yeah, it certainly seems to. Yeah,
Yeah.
good. Well, I'll be looking to see in your next report how it changes. And I keep thinking there's all kinds of AI questions that we haven't thought of to ask yet. So, Tara, maybe you and I put our heads together offline on that, and we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good. Well, another thing that EETech does is offer a suite of services or solutions for marketers to help them with their digital marketing efforts. So, when I saw this on your website, I thought, wait, what? I thought we were all about engineering communities. So, why this focus? Why are you helping that digital marketer? And what are some of the big ways that people are leveraging your solutions?
Yeah, so one thing that if you look at the history of EETech and some of the people who are involved, we're engineers and we're working on not from where I came from, the publishing side. They were more from the engineering side. So early on, the company did develop online calculators and tools for some companies. It's sort of built into the DNA of the company. But those things are very, very valuable. If you talk to our customers or our partners, engineers need to figure out very quickly, is this component, this part, or this product, is it going to work for me? And one of the easiest way to do it is to put in some parameters into a tool and say, here's the voltage and here's the heat dissipation. And so very quickly they can figure out, yeah, that part could work for me. I should take a deeper look. And so it's all part of the kind of experience of an engineer. They need to find out about the products and they need to figure out quickly if it's going to work. And so that's where the tools side of things comes in. And I think it's really an essential part of an industrial. I know you cover more than just electronics, but industrial marketing, some of these products are very complex, right? If you just look at a data sheet, that's one set of information, but you need to figure out, is this going to work in my application? What are these other pieces of information I need? So the tools and services around product discovery or product evaluation are really, really important. And luckily we have kind of deep roots in that. And that's part of our business. It's growing very fast, actually.
Yeah. So how can we help that technical buyer self-serve on the website and get further into their journey? And I could see where that takes a lot of friction out of the buying process, and it gives a nod to those engineers that don't want to pick up the phone, that want to do self-discovery,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And by offering those, you're more likely to close that sale. I mean, I know Cadena's Part Solutions has data that shows that, that
Right.
I'd rather pick a vendor that has more self-service solutions.
Right. And Wendy, your research that you presented at your event showed that 66% of the buyer's journey is being completed online before they have any contact other than with the customer, than with the company. And so I think that's really critical. The more of that you could actually get to them that's useful, I think I don't think it's just it's essential now. It's not a luxury anymore.
No.
They need to see that information. And I think you're right. I think it's companies really need to be delivering that kind of self-help, if you like, early on in the sales in the funnel, the discovery process, whatever you want to call it. And I think we know that. And some companies don't have those people on staff who can build those tools, but we do. Right. So that's why it's become a critical part of what EETech does.
Yeah, what a great partnership. So I know that you break down these tools into some categories, if you will, under search and design and e-commerce. So out of those, I'm curious, what's trending right now for, say, electronics companies or semiconductor? What are they gravitating towards? What do you feel is the table stake and maybe the most differentiated offering?
Yeah, it's actually quite a deep well there. So,
Fair enough.
but when an engineer has seen a product that they might be able to use, one of the things that they do want to know is there a version that fits for my specs? So a product configurator, like a part number builder, a block diagram, right? Doing parametric search, just figuring out if I put so it's not one thing. I think it's a collection of things, because that some companies can have 10,000 parts, right? How are they going to find the one that they're going to design with, right? I think it's quickly filtering through all of that. So yeah, I wouldn't point to, I mean, I think it's a combination of products depending on the application.
Fair enough. Yeah. And the number of products, the complexity, I could see where a lot of factors go into that. And then I could see some scenario where a company invests heavily in one piece of self-service, but then ignores the rest. So it's there's also maybe that, there needs to
Absolutely.
be a
Yeah.
continuous journey here.
And engineers, is it in stock at my favorite distributor? Right. I don't want to be specking a part or looking at a part that I can't get. If I want to order a sample, or I want to get an eval kit, or or something, is it available? Because obviously during COVID, everybody went through the part shortage nightmare, right? And so you've got to be careful that you design with something you can get your hands on. So that's where the e-commerce piece comes to it. It's not just, is this part good for me, but is it available?
Yes.
So those two need to go together. You're absolutely right. You can't just do, oh, we have a great calculator here, which will tell you what size, what kind of connector you need or whatever. But no, but can I buy it? Right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, we're feeling that pain because my daughter's waiting on a hybrid battery replacement, and her car's been sitting in a lot since October 30th of last year. So supply chain is still a problem.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But
Wow.
I digress. If someone's listening and they work for a small manufacturing company, they may be thinking, "Oh, parametric search, la-di-da, that's no way I can invest in these fancy things for my website. I'm too small." Is that true?
I would say no, not at all. We have a very well-worn path to how we put together parametric search. Obviously, there's some technical knowledge needed and luckily we have that technical. It's actually not as hard. It sounds a bit overwhelming at first, but no, it's not actually. And we have international teams of engineers who work within the EETech family, so we can get these done very quickly. And so no, it sounds overwhelming, but really it's not. But you do need a kind of base level of expertise. But once you start working with us, you'll find it's not that difficult, and it's and the pricing is very reasonable.
Great. Thank you for that. I know that on your website you have case studies of and from marketers talking about the types of tools that they've integrated into their website and what the results were. So I encourage people to go take a look at that, and it's helpful, right? Seeing, oh, okay, and Ellen from ETA is on there. My buddy Ellen, she's also been on the show, and so just hearing people's experiences and seeing the size of company, what they implemented and why is so helpful. So great job on just content on your website. I like that. Well, what are some just parting advice? Marketers in electronics, they're listening to all of this. They're wondering, okay, what new thing should I adopt today? What advice would you give to them?
Just knowing your audience. And I think going beyond knowing your audience is knowing like where they hang out and how they feel. I think that's why research is such a big part of all of this. I think I would say, everybody understands the AI thing at this point. If you don't understand that AI is important at this point, like probably need to hop on that train very, very quickly. And just looking at this, I feel like we're on the verge of this massive shift. They came out with this research point that by 2025, like 75% of the workforce is going to be millennial and Gen Z. So I think taking a look at, again, like how they interact with the internet, where they hang out, and just really knowing that audience and almost like planning for that shift and adopting AI is probably going to be your best bet for the next couple of years at least.
That shift. I'm telling you,
Yep.
I was looking around. I was at ERA recently, the Electronics Representatives Association annual conference, and looking at the age of folks in the room. And I thought, in 5 years, this whole room will look completely different. It's coming soon.
Yeah.
All right, David, final advice.
And I would say one of the things that we've been talking a lot about is there's obviously been a resurgence in trade shows have come back with a vengeance since COVID.
Yes.
But I think some marketers are struggling with the disconnect between the trade show and the website, and there was a whole other thing that COVID related that Terra's been on me about, which is QR codes. I thought they were going to die, but
I
QR
know.
codes have come
Right?
roaring back. In fact, I was at the EETech, the power show, and a lot of customers have got the QR codes on their business cards. And so, how what happens as a trade show experience, and then how they connect to the website. And then that, I think, is an area where a lot of marketers are really struggling, actually, but the QR code is kind of a bridge to that, because then you get them to the website, they've seen that maybe they saw something at a show, but then how do they connect later? And so that was kind of a fun tip that Terra's been all over us about. We got the QR code is not dead. In fact, it's come back with a vengeance.
It's come back thanks to those menus and the smartphones having an easy way to interact with them. Yeah. I remember putting QR codes on our trade show graphics back in the early 2000s, and no one clicked on it, right? And they were in ads, and they just didn't have the right, interface, I guess. So yes, Terra, I'm with you. They're here. Well, good. Well, where can our listeners go to connect with you and learn more about EETech?
Probably the easiest email is research@eetech.com. And so that'll go to Terra, and we'll, if people are interested in researching their own websites or working with us on other industry or brand research, that's an easy entry point. Research@eetech.com. We'll get it to Terra and the rest of us very quickly. So that's, I should hold up a QR code.
No. It's all right. We put links in the show notes. No QR codes needed here. But and then of course you're both on LinkedIn. So
absolutely, yes.
And EETech.com.
EETech.com, yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both for stopping by today.
It's great to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining me today on Content Marketing Engineered. For show notes, including links to resources, visit truemarketing.com/podcast. While there, you can subscribe to our blog and our newsletter and order a copy of my book, Content Marketing Engineered. Also, I would love your reviews on this podcast. So please, when you get a chance, subscribe and leave me your review on your favorite podcast subscription platform. Thanks and have a great day.